Over before it could get started, with a schedule that was already in shambles after several canceled games and the ongoing concerns related to coronavirus being transferred through close contact. UConn officially canceled its football season today. It was set to be the first season for the Huskies as an independent program. On that note, we bring in our guy, the mouth of the South, Paul Feinbaum. Paul, thank you so much for being with us, and a lot to get into here. Obviously, this one's personal for me, UConn alum, and I'm a season ticket holder, men's and women's basketball and football. And clearly, there's no season. So I want you to touch on that, and then I want to get into some of the other safety protocols going around with the other conferences. What was your reaction when you heard that?
It's interesting, Molly, you hear about every other conference playing because of financial reasons. I think UConn canceled because of financial reasons. They are in debt right now. They're in the transfer of leagues, as you well know. Their schedule had been decimated, and I think they made the right call, just saying it's not worth it. We're going to lose more money. We don't really want to invest in this season because it's going to be a lost cause anyway. What the bigger story in college football is, will middle-of-the-pack schools follow them? I think they will. And then you have a couple of other things happening. You have the Big Ten announcing their schedule today on Labor Day weekend. So think about this for a second. The Big 12 is going to start on August 28th. The next week, the Big Ten will start, as will the ACC. And then you go to the end of the month, of September 26th, when the Pac-12 and the SEC. So anyone who doesn't believe that college football is a royal mess, think about the fact that the college football season will open over a 5-week stretch. And the people at the end, I believe, are the smartest. Their fans may not be happy about this, but Molly, I think at the back end conferences want to see what happens at the front end. Meaning, if those week 0 games don't go well, if when the Big Ten starts, you start seeing outbreaks and you have to shut programs down temporarily, you may see the whole thing collapse. And there's one more thing here. Safety. There was a story coming out of Colorado yesterday. A couple of players told a newspaper out there that the Colorado State coaches were discouraging them from being honest about testing positive for COVID. There were reports that their contact tracing was being finagled, that they were not social distancing. Same thing came out of the player from Virginia Tech, which I discussed with you guys on Monday, that he complained that it wasn't safe. And for all the hot air that college administrators want to say that safety is the first issue, there are some cracks out there, and I don't think this is getting enough attention.
That's egregious and shameful, Max.
Of course, and probably illegal. It sounds like people could be prosecuted for that if certain things were proven true, or should be at least. Paul, you know, you love college football, obviously, right? A big chunk of your life is dedicated to following it and explaining it to people and opining about it. And it's not just for the love of football. Like, if it was just about football, then the NFL, right? That's the highest league. So it's not just about the quality of play. It's about the fact that it is amateur, supposedly. There's the veneer of amateurism, at least. The schools, the rivalries, that time in people's lives, the whole thing. What this is really shining a light on, it seems to me, is the fact that that is all a sham, that the decisions are made strictly about business, that whenever they talk about their concern for the student athletes, it's utter hypocrisy, just nonsense. But I don't know if it's ever been laid as bare as it is right now during this pandemic under these conditions. What do you think the lasting effect of this on the college game could be?
Well, I think that's the ultimate question. And I think ultimately, if you're a college president, and Max, we've all sat through graduation and commencement and listened to college presidents talk about the integrity of the academic institution. If one of these presidents sign off on the current plan and the worst thing happens, something catastrophic, something cataclysmic occurs, and I think it's pretty easy to figure out what that is, then what do they say then? I'm not even talking about the liability. I don't understand all the machinations of where that goes, but that is another river to cross here. But you're talking about possibly a stain on this sport that can never be changed irreparably. Damaged. And I think that's a major concern. Right now, I still think the plans are where everyone's swimming across the river and trying to get to the other side, meaning the opening weekend. But all the conversation about we have it under control, we have the protocols, I think is nonsensical. We're still seeing outbreaks across the board. Rutgers had a severe outbreak this week. You've read about other ones. And the thing that concerns me the most is the lack of transparency. Some schools are admitting, yes, we've had issues. We put out 417 tests and we've had 4 positive, just like Major League Baseball, just like the NFL, just like the NBA. But in college football, it's up to the individual schools. And I've heard horror stories at some schools where the coaches simply don't care. Football coaches are like a lot of other people in athletics, but they're a little bit more stringent. They're a little bit more militaristic. And I'm concerned that a lot of coaches are looking the other way. Players are intimidated by these coaches. You're seeing some opt-out, but not to the degree that we've seen in the NFL. And ultimately, some idiotic football coach is going to bring the whole system down if we're not careful.
No question. Paul, one other thing I wanted to get your thoughts on here quickly. I'd also heard you were on Get Up earlier, and we saw that the Big Ten and Michigan, they're charging ahead. What can you tell us about that and their upcoming schedule?
Well, the most interesting part of that is that Michigan and Ohio State, which is always the weekend of Thanksgiving, it's the end of the regular season. That game has been moved to the end of October. And I'm not joking about it, but it's probably good news for Jim Harbaugh. Now he doesn't end the season with a loss to Ohio State. He gets it out of the way early before Halloween. But it's aggressive by the Big Ten. But what conferences are doing right now, Molly and Max, they're feeding red meat to the fans who call in my program and that ultimately will listen to every other program. I don't know if they're being sincere, but they're just trying to do whatever they're supposed to do right now. But we have still not really hit the bottom line here of whether this season will go on. It looks like it's going to start. And by the way, we're only 3 weeks away from the so-called week 0. I think we'll get there. But once we start playing football games, I think it's anyone's guess whether we'll get to the end of September, the end of October, or certainly to the end of the season.
Paul, the off-the-field stuff, of course, is swallowing up any other, story. There's not a lot of oxygen left for stories. I think partly because there's skepticism. I'm very skeptical that they'll ever finish the season, may not even start it, in fact. But what story, pandemic aside, do you think is kind of most worthy of being out there? Something that could pertain to on the field, a storyline with a coach, a player, a team that you would otherwise be talking about right now were it not for the pandemic?
Yeah, I think it comes down to 2 players in college football. The face of college football this season are 2 quarterbacks. Justin Fields at Ohio State. Remember, he transferred from Georgia. And Trevor Lawrence, who went into last season as the Heisman favorite at Clemson. So you have those 2 stories, and then there's always Alabama. What's going to happen there? I mean, Nick Saban turned 69 here in a couple of weeks, and you have to wonder, he's having a great recruiting class. He's coming off of a terrible season, Max. He lost 2 games last year and destroyed Michigan in a bowl game. So those are the bigger issues. I think as we get closer, I'm following this is back to COVID, the opt-outs. Are we going to see more prominent players opt out as we get closer to the first game? I think we will. They're watching the NFL. And then one more thing that we talked about Monday, and I know you weren't here, that continues to be underneath the surface, and that's what's happening out in the Pac-12. The players in the Pac-12 want to negotiate with the conference commissioner. Will this spread across the country as this chaos reigns? And I suspect that it will.
I just want to wrap this up, Paul. Thank you so much. This whole segment's been enlightening, but the story that you said, and it's not getting enough attention, that Colorado State football coaches are being accused of telling players and staffs not to reveal their COVID-19 symptoms. I just want to remind everyone, we're talking about people's lives at stake, and the after effects of this virus can be absolutely devastating. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I just had to make mention of it again. It's unbelievable. Go ahead, Max.
It's not even about the players, really, who may have the disease. It's about the fact that they then spread it if they're not reporting that they have it. Then they become vectors for the disease. And the whole point of taking the precautions that people are taking is the societal benefit of protecting the elderly and those with underlying conditions, those most vulnerable among us, for whom the disease can be fatal. I mean, it can be fatal even for the not the most vulnerable, but especially for the most vulnerable among us.